Hello, my name is Reverend Mace Hall, and I have the privilege of serving on the One Lamb Initiative Committee. And one of the things we do is we take time to interview people who are experts in the field of mental wellness and also people who have faced their own mental challenges. And today we happen to have one lady here, Kenya Phillips, who's experienced both. Kenya is very honest about her own mental well-being challenges. And since then, she has become a life coach, mental and health coach, and she runs a recovery center, as well as she became a NAMI, National Alliance of Mental
illness.
I forgot it. She's a trainer for them, and she recently joined the staff of Plan Georgia, which also addresses mental wellness issues. And I personally am thrilled to get to sit down with you and talk about your interesting journey. And tell us, to start off with, when did you start realizing you were having some mental well-being challenges?
Definitely. That's a great question, by the way. It actually started while I was attending Clark Atlanta University, 1996, and I noticed I wasn't sleeping very well. I was very irritated, and I was having a very hard time focusing on my studies, focusing on connecting with my classes, and also I was having trouble with the idea of rest. So even without sleep, I just couldn't even be still. I was very hyper. And then I started going through a slow spill of depression on one end where I was having a lot of mood swings. And on the other end, I was having heightened anxiety. And we later discovered from a medical practitioner perspective that I was experiencing bipolar 1.
Bipolar 1. And that's the more complicated diagnosis about bipolar,
yes.
isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And I just recently, because ironically, in the last week, I have met two people who have had children diagnosed with bipolar 2. And I didn't even know there was a distinction. So for our viewers, could you explain that? Because I didn't really understand it either.
Definitely. I'm going to explain it. I like using person-centered language. So for me, my experience with bipolar 1, basically what that looks like is if anyone can picture a roller coaster, you go all the way up and then you have to come down at some point. So for me, I have moments where I'm very extremely heightened. That's what that would look like without the medication. I'm just very heightened with anxiety or just on this high horse as if I can conquer the world all in one day. We all know that's not reality. But then it's a moment where I come down and it's called the crash. Crash meaning that's where I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted because I was trying to conquer the world, having a Superman syndrome or Wonder Woman syndrome. So for other people who experience different levels of bipolar, because I think there's like 4 different aspects or is variations of bipolar. Some people may stay in areas or spaces where they're extremely low or they extremely depressed most of the time. Others may be at a space where they're experiencing the heightened levels where they're just like, I can do this, I could conquer. And some people just are at base level where they're just neither too high or too low, but it's base level at all times. The hope is for people just to be at whatever considered is normal for them. And for me, what that looks like is just having a healthy balance, not too extreme one way or the other.
So you went to a psychiatrist, I guess, to get this diagnosis, and they did testing on you?
Yes. I did see a psychiatrist. I did also experience a treatment team, meaning I also would go to counseling. I still get support from a counselor, a LPC or a licensed counselor. I still make sure I take my medications and everything. And more importantly, practice whole health and wellness for myself by making sure I take the time out I need to rest, regroup, recenter, so I can have a healthy work and life balance.
So does what you're doing now, because I've heard about bipolar really affecting sleep patterns.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, like people can't sleep at all.
It can vary. And a lot of it, I can't speak for all people who experience bipolar, but for me personally, and from people I've talked to, it's the sleep is influenced because of the sensory picking up other energy in the atmosphere. So That's why it's a saying that says, be mindful of what you're tuning into before whatever the routine of sleep is for the person. So if I know I want to go to bed at a set time, like 9:00, just using that as an example, if I watch a scary movie or if I watch something that is very high sensational, it's not going to allow me to rest. But if I put on what I normally would put on, which is soft, soothing music or something that doesn't have words, or maybe just have nothing on and just allow my body to just calm down, look at the ceiling, or do something that's not this a form of mindfulness. It's going to help me to relax. And being mindful of the telephone and social media, not trying to stimulate myself.
That's such good advice. I mean, and it's funny sitting here doing these interviews, so many people have referenced our, dependency on these devices and the interruption with their entire studies on how it's interrupted our thought process and sleeping patterns. And I'm sure if you have a diagnosable illness, that it is even that much more exacerbated.
It is, and it can be. And that's why for me it's important not only to be able to I call it turning down the noise. It's also for me to be able to know when to tap into friends or my village. So if I'm needing to talk through something so I can get a good night's rest, to be able to, talk through it. Even if it's like, can I just talk to you for 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Have something on my mind, because everything is not always a journal entry for me. And also prayer is important because prayers help me in so many ways, but sometimes I need an actual person to talk to who also, in addition to my higher power, God, who gets me, he's put people here also to be part of my village that I can entrust with my story, who can help me navigate those spaces.
That's great. And you're lucky. That's a wonderful thing. Yes. So you found out you had this illness. You can take medication. I'm assuming you're supposed to take it for the rest of your life.
Right.
You never get to go off of it.
I've had, and all transparent because I'm very transparent, I have tried natural approaches, but for right now, the medications are working. So it's kind of like if something's working, I don't need to try to break it down and try to figure out something new. But for me, it's working. I've noticed when I take medication, I'm a lot more centered. I'm a lot more grounded. Of course, I have to do my own due diligence, meaning exercise my mind. Because sometimes people use the word exercise and most people think quickly like, oh, that's strictly physical. But for me, I have to make sure I'm using my mind, whether it's reading a good book or maybe I need to listen to some music to just kind of exercise my mind in the sense of making sure I have a healthy balance and healthy thoughts, positive thoughts. Also take the rest piece again. I have to make sure I'm taking breaks in the day. So that's important. Eating in a healthy manner. If I know, like for instance, coming in here today, I was like, no, I might not want to eat, just using this as an example, macaroni and cheese might not be the wisest choice. I might need to eat some peanuts or something so I'm not like falling asleep at the wheel, or getting tired or restless at the wheel. So certain things I try to be proactive with so that not only am I practicing self-care for myself, but I'm being mindful of how I'm showing up with others.
After your diagnosis, is that when you took the classes to become a life coach, or did you go to NAMI first? What was the order of that?
NAMI first, and this is a short but yet kind of funny story to me, and not so funny for other people who may not have a village of support. I consider myself by myself for years, meaning about, if you can imagine, and if the audience can imagine, 1996 all the way up to about 2009, only being asked the one question that can be very annoying to a person who experiences a diagnosis: are you taking your medication?
Oh.
I just want everybody just to sit with that for a moment. And in 2009, I'm watching a faith-based documentary, which is a beautiful dynamics of, I'm in a church facility now, having the privilege to just converse with you. And it was the faith-based documentary, which was a NAMI-based documentary, our National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I was like, wow, who did that? And when I discovered, I made a phone call the same day, that evening. But I thought I was going to get an answering machine. So I was all prepared, like, I'm going to leave me a voicemail. Somebody's going to call me in about a week or so. I didn't know somebody was going to pick up. And it was the vice president of NAMI. And it was like, oh, if you're serious, we'll come pick you up right now. We have a support group tonight. I was like, huh? But I went, and that was the beginning of my journey with NAMI, 2009, if I'm not mistaken.
And then you went through the training and became a leader, right?
Yes, I became a leader in multiple programs. They have a program which is for peer mentorship. They have a program which is for support group that I'm a state trainer for. They also have another program which is called Ending the Silence, where we go out into the high schools and we educating the teachers as well as the staff and faculty, and more importantly, those whom they serving, which are the children at the schools as well. And then in addition to that, I also do, I'm a national trainer for NAMI with Connections, which is their support group. So, and it's, for me, it's an opportunity not only to give back, but for me to be accountable to my own personal health and wellness, because I get energy when I'm around people.
That's great. That's great. We talked originally, and I'm just trying to put it, you had a real sinking spell. I think a couple of times where you weren't sure you wanted to live any longer. Am I remembering that correctly?
You're remembering correctly.
And it was that, so that must have been pre-diagnosed at the bipolar and a byproduct of the bipolar.
Exactly. It was. I had a moment where I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt lonely. I know a lot of people talk about lonely. I felt lonely and loneliness. It was like a grief within myself. When I look back in those spaces, it was dark. It was cloudy. It was foggy. It was a sense of, I don't know where I fit and I don't know where I'm going. And I was grieving, but I thought I was grieving people, but I was really grieving God, not realizing the question within me was like, why do I have to take these medicines? Why do I have to fight? And why am I always misunderstood? And it wasn't until I started like really looking in the Bible and really listening to messages by different ministers and really tapping back into my spiritual foundation that I started to go, you know what? Most of us as Christians are misfits if we really think about it. So it didn't hit me so negative anymore. And I had to allow organizations like NAMI to just love on me. So even in the midst of losses, whether my husband passing in 2020 on Valentine's Day.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Whether it was my father who passed in October the same year, or even just coming to the space of embracing, I'm single, I'm a widow, I have a daughter to raise. I had to tap back into the blessing of what my husband, my belated husband, had talked to me about, which was, do you want to go to school and work on your doctorate, or do you want to start a business to support my role as not only just as a person who with lived experience, but to give back? Because that's what keeps me going, is giving back. And then what stopped me from just completing the act, if you will, of doing something to myself in a harmful way was I had a big box in my room while I was in seminary. And I recall it like it was yesterday. It was this big box and it was full of papers. And, but the papers were all writings. And I could hear God's voice, a small, still voice. And it was like, Kenya, if you do something to yourself, do you realize you have so many books you have not even begun the process? It hasn't even started to release yet. And it was like right in that moment, it was just like, I don't want to leave here and I'm full still. I'm supposed to be empty. So it was like, well, pause and finish the process and get it together. And I had to hear God directly.
Sounds very powerful.
Yeah.
Just stopped you right in the tracks, right?
Stopped me right in the tracks. That same day, I remember I was driving and I was very irrational in my thought process. And only thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. From what I was told, my belated father was driving up and down the street in metropolitan Atlanta looking for me. And they couldn't find me because I was a Jane Doe, because I didn't have any license on me, because I was just irrational in my thoughts. So, but I was in the hospital, and right before they was about to release it on the big news because of the 72-hour period of wait. My grandfather, my other belated grandfather, made it here. And he got here, and it's a 6.5-hour drive. And I mention that for a reason because he got here from Mississippi all the way to Atlanta. And he kissed me on my forehead. Mind you, I'm in a coma because the car that I was found in, they still couldn't figure out to this day how I survived because I hit a gas line. And it was like, she's here. And the car didn't blow up. And the car flipped over one time and it had a penny-sized mark on it. And then I was a Jane Doe for 3 days. But when they found me, my father was let to go back to the same hospital again. And they was like, wait a minute, she is here. And my grandfather, when he gets there, that's when my eyes open. He kissed me on my forehead. And my exact words, I cannot make this up, was the devil is a liar, as my eyes were opening. And that was my reality check of, no, between that and what God already had spoken to me, I knew it was time. And then I just remember pushing, and it felt like I was in a trance of a dream, the coma part. And then all I kept picturing was this rock. And on the rock, it was like hieroglyphic, and it said Jesus. And I kept trying to push to get through the door or back to my conscious self. And I couldn't push. And I was like, I don't have the strength. So I'm pushing and pushing. And I was like, I don't have the strength. So when I was kissed on the forehead from my grandfather, it was like the unconscious self was coming in too with the conscious self. And I was able to push.
That's a great story. I mean, that's amazing. And here you are.
Here I am.
And making a difference.
Yes, that brings me joy. And I feel like it gives me purpose in what God has me assigned to do. Almost daily, I'm like, God, what is my assignment? What do you want me to do today? And I do get mad at myself when I get distracted. Distracted for me may mean getting pulled away from what my purpose is, because I feel it, the moral compass side of me. And I'm like, God, help me to stay in strength and foundation with what you want me to do. Let your will be done. That's enough for me.
Another thing that we've talked about is that, I'm going to use your words.
Sure.
You are a spoken word artist, author, and a woman of faith. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about the humanities and arts, talk to me about how that helps on your healing journey and to help others.
May I share a piece with you? It's so much easier just to dive in. The arts helps me a lot, but it's a specific signature piece that I share quite often when I'm out, and it's entitled Black is Black. I will set a precursor on it, though. Black is Black has nothing to do with color. It has more to do with the evolve of oneself from a place of darkness to a place of awakened consciousness, as we just talked about. So if everyone who's viewing can just rest their eyes for a moment and try not to fall asleep. But it's called Black is Black. Black is ecstasy. Black is my soul. Black surrounds me. Black unfolds. Lost I was once like a bird in a fleet. I was loose amongst others. I was longing to be free. A time has come. A new day is here. All triumphs of past are now at end. Colors are colors. Closed eyes cannot see. We must clear the darkened clouds. Cool winds are soon to come. We must keep in mind kindness as a part, kept deep within the one who recognizes and knows their own heart. So as we awaken, we must know Black is Black. Black is my soul. Black is that part of me that awakens so that I can only know Black is. Thank you.
It's beautiful. Did you write it?
Mm-hmm. I actually wrote it almost, it's been decades, but it's like I had to learn it in real time when I wrote it.
I would love a copy of that.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
For me personally, and if you don't mind, I'll probably put it on the One Lamb website. Is that okay?
I would love it. Yes, ma'am. That would mean a lot.
I think a lot of people would like to use that as a reminder of the evolving nature of ourselves and how even in the worst moments, God's with us and there's still a chance. There's still hope. It's
definitely still hope. Even if it's like a mustard seed, it's still hope. And that's been my journey constantly.
One other thing I want to ask you about, though, is you're in here when you wrote to me, you talked about the way Scripture has played into your healing and your journey through your mental challenges, and now all the exciting things you're doing, addressing other people who are also having their own difficult journeys with their emotions. Can you talk to me a little bit about like what scriptures do you lean on?
It's for me, it's deep, but it's short. And I'm gonna answer your question, but I want to say this. This is something they used to talk to me about in seminary. They would say, don't eisegete the the eisegete versus exegete. So are we putting in, and so I had to learn the power of, am I putting me into the scripture or am I actually embracing it? So faith without works is dead. I had to get to a place where I recognize, like, you know what? After I get off my knees, after I dust myself off, like the hospitalization, or after a 1013 where I may have been hospitalized involuntarily, what am I going to do with that? Or Christ is my strength or my source, or just remembering God is everything. So I had to get to a place even still now where I'm like, as I'm reading and rereading and just diving in, it just stands out to me more and more that everything is one from a biblical space. And now, like when I read, I'm so excited. I'm like, oh, what's getting ready to happen next? As if it's like never been read before. It's like, oh, because every time I read, I get new vision, new insight. And for me, the biggest journey, not from a, let me quote every scripture standpoint, but more so from the standpoint of, I know without a shadow of a doubt, God is real. And that's who's been keeping me this whole time. His promises, his purpose, his intent. And I'm quick to tell people from a biblical space, the one thing I remember is, and this ties into the prayer component, I remember being at my home church here in Atlanta. And I remember going to the altar for the altar call. This was way before I was like really all the way on the pulpit. And I just remember going up there, and this particular day, I was really emotional. And I was always taught, if you have an issue, you take it to the church. But I remember one by one, nobody knew what to do with the heaviness that I was experiencing. And this was some decades ago. But there was one who stayed with me. They took me to the back and they stayed with me and they held me. And it reminded me, like, that one, even as we talk about the lamb, that one, just not forgetting that one lost child or that one lost sheep, just not forgetting. And so I felt like I was covered because somebody just held me, even if they didn't say anything, just the power of presence. And that's how I think about God. I'm like, I've learned the power. I'm learning, and I had to learn, but I'm still learning the power of meditation, the power of prayer, the power of pause and listening to and waiting for God. Because sometimes it's easy to get ahead and could be going the wrong direction. So the peace be still is real.
And also, I think sometimes we, right or wrong, it's something I kind of struggle with in mind. We're one person. And in the chasm of the world, we're very tiny. We really are just a grain of sand. Yes. We're insignificant in so many ways that our lives are so short if you look at time. But then the miracle of it is you're still that one that's lost, and God's still going to go get you.
Yes.
And that to me is, I don't really understand it, but it's just so reassuring.
Yes.
So incredibly reassuring.
It definitely is. And that speaks to me on so many levels. I'm at this place, and it's not an arrival place. This is more so a recognition space where I'm starting to see God's hand. Like when I look back in certain spaces, like, it could be, if I'm really transparent about it, it could be like, wow, I didn't go to that party, or I didn't go to XYZ when I was younger, or all my cousins were like real protective, like, Kenya, you can't be over here. You're supposed to be over there. And I look back and I'm like, wow, God was protecting me. Even if it was through family. They may have been in places, but they was like, you don't belong here. You're not supposed to be over here. You're supposed to be in school getting your studies on. You're supposed to be over there. Was I perfect? No. But I had covering. around me to keep me grounded, even in moments where I was unaware of the why, but it makes sense now. And it's like, even as I journey forward, there are moments, yeah, where I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm tired. Or, and he'll be like, rest. I'm giving you rest. Or being able to be present with my daughter. But what speaks to me even with her is I can't ask her to be a leader if I'm not walking in an authority I'm supposed to be walking in. So I try to lead by example. When she asks questions, I don't try to give her all the answers. I a lot of times throw it back at her in an open-ended way and be like, what are your thoughts? But to see her arrive in leadership and in her own sweet preteen self-state,
That's a lot to
I'm
say,
like,
too.
wow. It just amazes me. She dances. She loves to dance. So to see her in her element is a beautiful thing.
Did she get that from you?
She's going to say no, but I dance, my mom dance, but she can do a lot of interpretive dance. She knows how to do the hip hop dance. She even knows how to blend it to different dynamics and go a different way. She's on a competitive dance team. So she can do steps with hers. For me, I'm more free-spirited dancer. So, yeah.
But one day she has something she can do for her with her body that's physical health.
Yes.
At the same time, the arts allow for mental well-being as well.
Yes.
As well. Whether it's writing or singing or dancing or playing an instrument, it brings something whole to us.
It does.
From a totally different place than just pure exercise.
Oh, definitely. And I think for me, my biggest joy, if you will, is I'm an advocate, right? Or I'm a speak up when it's time to speak up. But it all started with that 2009 connection with NAMI, where it wasn't about like, what can I do for others in that moment? It was about, can I be connected with some people? I just want to know I'm not by myself. And when I realized I wasn't by myself, that was affirming. And I was like, I wonder how many other people felt like I did. And I ran into so many who felt like I did. And being able to tap back into that space and give back the advocacy piece, it starts with being able to live that way, like you're saying, the physical, the mind, body, soul, and spirit, making sure it's being fed. So that's important.
Well, I think I want to close with this. One of the things when we were talking earlier, it made me think, you got a lot from NAMI, which is not a faith-based organization. But it's a wonderful organization. And we're doing this through a church, and other faiths are doing similar things, whether they're Buddhist or Hindu or Jewish or Muslim. How do you think that faith groups can better avail themselves to people who are facing a mental health crisis?
Two things I want to say. NAMI does have a faith-based component. They have a faith-based component, but it's not. But you're correct, though. They're not built up on that priest, but they do have a faith-based component for those who choose to take that route. So I want to piggyback from that space that I think it starts with people having an ear to hear. Like when I first spoke to you, when we had our conversation, we listened to each other. And even now, it's like being able to hear one another. Too many times people are busy, and I use this as a metaphor when I talk to people. I said sometimes, like even within some church settings, we'll say pass the peace. Different churches use different ways of saying it. Or they may be like, okay, it's announcements, let's welcome the visitors, but the welcome goes by so quick, people are not pausing to hear a response from their neighbor who's sitting literally next to them, or even just acknowledging them. So I think acknowledgement, affirmation, but deeper than that, pausing long enough to hear what's not even being said, the nonverbal. And those are things that I tap into with a lot of the courses that I'm training people on. But the power of presence, we can't forget that, because that's why suicide is so high. That's why people feel lost in the midst of society. That's why bullying's taking place. That's why people be signing contracts and they're thinking they're being affirmed one way, but they're not being heard in another way. And when we look at it from a spiritual space or a faith-based space, it's important for us also to recognize that everybody doesn't come from the same custom, culture, or background, but we're all human. We all bleed. We all hurt. We all have emotion. We all walk in some type of way. I'm not saying the physical walk, but we're all walking trying to get somewhere. It's a metaphor. And I think it's important for us to hear one another's story, because that's how we grow and learn how to connect together.
Well, I am really grateful to you for sharing your story. You really are a touching person, and what you've been through and the way you've emerged is inspiring, and I really appreciate you for it. And you're also very honest about it, which is sometimes really tough. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I always kind of end these videos and talk about exactly what Kenya just said. We're all human. We all have great days, bad days, beautiful days, terrible days, good emotions, bad emotions. And as people of faith, we know that we've been created in the image of God. And hopefully faith communities can become places where people feel safe and nurtured and listened to, so that we can help people as they are grappling with the difficulties of life and being human. Thank you.